do you want?
We just want to talk.
The little girl couldn't have been older than 6. She was standing in front of a tattered blue tent on a cold gray sidewalk, her small fists wrapped around the canvas like it was the last solid thing in her world. And when 4 massive bikers rolled up on Harleys, leather, chrome, and the kind of silence that follows an engine cutting out, she didn't run, she didn't cry, she planted her feet and looked straight up at 'em. And she said the words that would change everything. "Please, don't take our tent. Mommy needs her medicine tonight." What happened over the next few hours didn't just save a mother's life. It exposed a man who had been destroying lives quietly, legally, and deliberately for years. A man so careful and so connected that no one had been able to touch him until now. By the time this story is over, you'll understand why that little girl was guarding a rusted tin box in a burning tent like it was worth more than anything money could buy. Because it was. Jax had been on the road for 22 years, not running from anything anymore. At least that's what he told himself. He had seen poverty up close, the kind that smells like damp concrete and last week's food, the kind the city builds highways over and calls progress. It didn't usually stop him, not because he didn't care, but because caring without being able to do something is its own kind of torture. But something about 5th and Main that evening made him cut the engine. Maybe it was the way the girl was standing, not hunched, not shrinking, braced, the way someone stands when they've already absorbed too many blows and they're just quietly waiting for the next one. Her sneakers were worn through at the toes. Her eyes were fixed on the 4 of them with a steadiness that had no business being in a 6-year-old's face. Diesel pulled up beside Jax, jaw tight. Colton and Maverick held position just behind. 3 men who had survived enough bad situations to know how to read a street. This one felt wrong in a specific, deliberate way. Jax climbed off the bike slowly. "We're not here to bother anybody," he said, keeping his voice low. "What's your name, kid?" "Emma," she said, and then, "Please don't take our tent. My mama needs her medicine tonight, and she can't walk to get it herself. If the tent's gone, the cold gets in, and when the cold gets in, she can't breathe right." She said it like she'd rehearsed it, like she'd said it before to other people who hadn't listened. Jax crouched down to her level. "What's your mom's name?" "Sarah. Can I check on her?" Emma didn't answer. She just slowly stepped aside. He pulled back the tent flap and the smell hit him before his eyes adjusted. Something damp and medicinal, and underneath it all, something that made his gut clench. Sarah was lying on a thin foam mat, her skin the color of old wax, her breathing shallow and wet. Her lips had a faint bluish tint at the edges. This wasn't a cold. This was serious. "She has a lung condition," Emma said from the entrance, her voice small and careful. "The medicine costs a lot. Sometimes we run out. The man said we had to leave the apartment and she couldn't take everything." Jax's hand stilled on Sarah's wrist. Faint pulse, irregular. He turned to look at Emma, who was watching him with those ancient eyes, and something cracked open in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. Then the black SUV turned onto the block. The vehicle moved slowly, deliberately, the way things move when they want you to feel them coming. It pulled to the curb and 2 men climbed out. Not police, not city workers. Private contractors in tactical vests, each carrying a heavy-duty steel crowbar like it was a clipboard. They didn't look at the bikers. That was their first mistake. "Cleanup crew," the lead man announced, scanning the tent with the detached efficiency of someone clocking inventory. "Mr. Sterling's orders. This location clears tonight." Emma stepped in front of the tent, 3.5 feet tall, worn sneakers, nothing else between her and two grown men with steel bars. She looked up at the lead man and said simply, "My mommy is sick. Please." He reached out to move her. Diesel's hand caught his wrist mid-air, not violently, not with any wasted movement. He just closed his fingers around the man's forearm and held it there and said very quietly, "Don't." The crowbar hit the pavement. Diesel had grown up watching his own mother get moved along from place to place, city shelters, church basements, parking lots where a shopping cart was the front door. He had never been able to stop it back then. His hand on that wrist was 20 years of waiting condensed into one motion. Inside the tent, Jax found a crumpled paper near the mat's edge and smoothed it out. Formal letterhead, legalese, a standard eviction notice. Then his eyes found the signature at the bottom, Sterling. The name hit him somewhere behind the sternum, not because he didn't know it, because he knew it too well and had spent years not understanding why it kept finding him. Before he could process it, the second SUV arrived, then a third, and then a man in a charcoal wool coat stepped out of the lead vehicle and surveyed the scene with the calm, measured look of someone who had purchased this outcome in advance. Late 50s, silver-haired, the particular stillness of a man who had never been told no and had stopped expecting to be. "I see we have an audience," Sterling said, looking at the bikers the way someone looks at an inconvenience rather than a threat. "Finish the clearance. Whatever's in the tent gets disposed of on site." He looked at Emma once, just once. Then he turned his back. Jack stepped out of the tent and placed himself between Sterling's men and the entrance. "There's a woman in there who needs a hospital, not a cleanup crew. You're not touching this tent." Sterling turned around slowly. He studied Jax the way a man studies something he expects to brush off his jacket. "This is private property. The encampment violates city code. Whatever happens to its occupants is a consequence of their choices." He paused. "Stand aside." "She has a lung condition and no medicine," Jack said. "That child is 6 years old. You want to clear them in the middle of the night with a woman who can barely breathe. That's what we're calling a legal right?" Something moved across Sterling's face. Not guilt, calculation. The look of a man deciding how much force is necessary. He nodded at the guard. The guard pulled a fuel canister from the back of the third vehicle. The smell reached Jax a second before his brain caught up with what was happening. Gasoline, being poured along the base of the canvas in long, deliberate strokes, like painting a wall. Emma screamed. Colton lunged for the guard and got a hand on his collar, but the second man was already crouching at the rear of the tent with a lighter, and the canvas caught with a sound like a sharp exhale, a rush of heat and orange that turned the whole structure into a lantern in under 3 seconds. Jax went back in for Sarah. The smoke dropped fast. He got his arms under her. She was lighter than she should have been, but the floor near the exit erupted as the accelerant reached it. Outside, the heavy clang of a steel crate being kicked against the flap. Then the metallic snap of a padlock. They were being sealed in. The heat was total and immediate. Sarah's eyes opened. Through the haze and the fever, she found his face. "He did this before," she rasped. "To us. It was raining, Emma was sick, and Sterling was at the apartment door. He locked us out in the storm. Emma's spare inhaler was still on the kitchen counter. I begged him. He reached into his coat, held it up so I could see it, and dropped it into the sewer grate. Her voice cracked. He laughed. He said, "Clutter doesn't need to breathe." Outside, through the roar of the fire, Sterling's voice drifted in, calm and unhurried. "Seal the perimeter." Before I tell you how Jax gets Sarah out of that burning tent, I need to stop for just a second. My mother always told me nobody wants to hear stories like this anymore, that people scroll past without caring. I'm trying to prove her wrong. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, and I genuinely believe stories like this one deserve to be heard. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that button right now. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to me. Okay, back to Jax, because what he does in the next 60 seconds, none of Sterling's men saw coming. Diesel and Maverick didn't exchange words. They read each other in a single glance and ran. 2 Harleys fired up in the darkness at the far end of the block. Colton heard the engines building and understood instantly. He grabbed Emma and pulled her back hard against the brick wall, shielding her with his body. The backs hit the steel gate at full throttle. The padlock didn't bend, it shattered. The gate swung wide. Colton tore the tent flap open from outside, and Jax came through the smoke with Sarah in his arms, her face pressed against his chest, her breathing shallow but present. Emma ran to her mother. She grabbed Sarah's hand and pressed it against her cheek and didn't let go. Jax stood in the smoke-thick air and looked at Sterling. Sterling reached into his coat pocket. He held up a small glass vial between his thumb and forefinger, catching the firelight deliberately, letting it glint. Sarah's medicine, the prescription she hadn't been able to take from the apartment, the one that restarted her lungs. "I've been keeping it safe for her," Sterling said, his voice entirely pleasant, since she clearly couldn't be trusted with her own property. His thumb drifted toward the iron grate at the curb. Step any closer and it goes down the drain, just like the last one. Jax didn't move. Emma looked up from beside her mother. She studied Sterling's face with the quiet, unblinking focus of an adult who has learned to read danger in adult expressions. Then she said softly, "You're the man from the apartment. You were there when it was raining. You made Mommy cry." Sterling didn't respond. He didn't look at her. That deliberate refusal to acknowledge the child told Jax everything. This wasn't someone who had made hard business decisions. This was someone who had decided a long time ago who counted as a person and who didn't, and been living by that decision ever since. "Colton," Jax said without raising his voice, "since the first SUV." Sterling's thumb stopped moving. Jax reached into the inside pocket of his vest and pulled out a folded set of papers. He shook them open slowly, watching Sterling's eyes track every movement. "My lawyer drafted these on the way here. 1 year of fully covered housing, a complete medical trust for Sarah and Emma, prescriptions, specialist visits, emergency care, all of it, funded by you, signed tonight." Sterling's expression didn't change. "You're not serious." "Colton's footage goes to the DA the moment I send a text. Arson, unlawful confinement, destruction of medical property, attempted murder, because that's exactly what a jury is going to call setting fire to a tent with a sick woman and a child locked inside. You sign these papers and I let the legal process run its course. You don't sign them, the footage goes first and they come find you." Sterling looked at the papers. He looked at the phone in Colton's hand. He looked at the 4 men standing in a loose half-circle in front of him. Men who had broken a steel gate, who had run into a burning tent, who had not moved a single inch since this started. Something behind his composure finally shifted. Not remorse, math, the cold arithmetic of a man calculating his exposure. He took the pen. He signed. Maverick photographed every page on the spot. Diesel texted the lawyer. Within 4 minutes, the documents were filed digitally and time-stamped, airtight. Sterling straightened his coat, looked at Emma one last time, that same blank, deliberate nothing, and walked back to his vehicle. As the SUV pulled away, Sarah's hand found Jax's arm. She whispered, "The medicine." The vial was still in Sterling's pocket. Colton was already moving. Colton caught the SUV at the light on the corner. He just rode his Harley up alongside the driver's window and looked at the tinted glass and waited. The window came down. The security guard in the passenger seat looked at Colton's face and made a quiet, personal decision. The vial came out through the window without a single word being said. Jax uncapped it and held it to Sarah's lips, one hand braced behind her head. She took the dose slowly. For a long moment, nothing happened. Emma held her mother's hand so tight her knuckles went white. Then Sarah's breathing deepened, one breath, then another, longer and steadier, and the blue at her lips began to fade. Emma pressed her face into her mother's shoulder and held on with everything she had. The arrests came within the hour. Sterling's men first. Caught on footage Colton had already sent to 3 separate people before the police even arrived. Sterling himself was pulled from his vehicle 2 blocks away. He didn't look at the officers. He looked at the patrol car camera. Then he looked away. Maverick found Emma a warm jacket from one of the saddlebags. She put it on without being asked, swimming in it, and stood next to Jax while the street filled with red and blue light. "Is Mommy gonna be okay now?" Emma asked. "She's gonna be better than okay," Jax said. Emma reached into the jacket pocket and held out a folded piece of cardboard, charred at the edges, a crayon drawing, a house with a sun above it, and a stick figure family standing out front. "I was saving that," she said, "for when we had a home again." Jax folded it carefully and put it in his vest. By 2 in the morning, they were in a furnished apartment on the 4th floor. Clean, heated, real locks on the door. Emma walked through every room, touching things, the kitchen counter, the window latch, the refrigerator door she opened and closed twice just because she could. Maverick sat on the edge of a real bed. Jax sat across from her. The color was coming back to her face slowly, like a sunrise after a very long night. She reached under the bed and pulled out the rusted tin box she'd carried out of the fire. She opened it. She sorted through the contents until she found what she was looking for. She handed him a photograph. It was old, faded to that particular warmth photographs from 20 years ago carry. Jax looked at it and felt the blood leave his face. It was him, younger, standing beside a man he recognized as Sarah's father, outside a house, his house, the one that burned. On the back, in the handwriting he now recognized, were 4 words. Phase 1. Watch him. "My father worked for Sterling years ago," Sarah said quietly, "before he understood what Sterling actually was. He told me Sterling doesn't just take properties, he takes people, specifically the ones who might one day become a problem, who might connect things together. He had a system, long, patient, methodical, dismantling lives before people ever realized they were targets." She met Jax's eyes. He's been watching you for 20 years. My father believed Sterling arranged your fire, the one that took your family. We weren't an accidental target, Jax. He found us because of you." The room was very quiet. "And Sterling isn't the one giving the orders. He never was." By morning, Sarah was asleep in a real bed. Emma was curled against her side, one hand still wrapped around her mother's wrist, even in sleep, a child's version of keeping watch, learned too young and held too long. Jax went downstairs. His brothers were on the steps, Diesel with a coffee, Colton on his phone, Maverick watching the street. The four backs at the curb, still carrying last night's soot. Nobody spoke for a while. That's the thing about riding with the right people. The silence never needs filling. Jax thought about the photograph in his vest, the fire he'd spent 20 years calling an accident, the name that had appeared at the edges of his life in small ways he'd never thought to question. He thought about Emma's crayon house with the sun above it, folded in the same pocket. "Not yet," he said, when Maverick asked if he was okay, "but I will be." He swung his leg over the back. His brothers stood without a word. 4 engines turned over in the gray morning air. He didn't know yet what Phase 2 looked like. He didn't know the name behind the name, but he knew how to ride towards something, and he knew now what he was riding for. Emma woke up and ate cereal at a kitchen table. She asked if she could turn on the TV, and Sarah said yes. She watched cartoons for 2 hours and fell asleep on the couch with a blanket pulled up to her chin. She didn't ask once if anyone was coming to take the tent. Sterling's charges were filed within 48 hours. The reparations trust was active within the week. And the photograph in Jax's vest, 4 words on the back in cold, precise handwriting, was only the first piece of something much larger that none of them were ready for yet. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you're not subscribed, do it right now. These stories don't disappear just because we stop telling them. They just stop being heard.